happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 288. Wow, on April 5th, 2023. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I am joining you tonight live from my parents' basement in north central Montana. Beautiful Great Falls, Montana, the jewel of the north central Rocky Mountains. And it's a real pleasure to join you from my birth city here in Montana. And joining me tonight, as always, good evening, Dr. Wesley Fryer. How are you tonight, sir?
Good evening, Jason. I am doing great. And yeah, it's a sign of hanging out with each other for a while. When we got on, I said, "Hey, you're in your parents' basement, aren't you?" So
I like to know that's a good meme for us to work on. So
absolutely, absolutely. Well, hey, I understand your Dogecoin investment took a little jump this week.
it did. You probably, for those of you that are on Twitter, have probably seen at least the web version of it. I don't know about the apps. There have been little Doge icons that have popped up everywhere, and I know I feel like Elon Musk. For those of you that recognize lines from Mean Girls, like "Stop trying to make fetch happen," I feel like telling Elon Musk must try to stop making Doge happen. Although since I own some Dogecoin that I bought as kind of a joke when it was super duper dirt cheap, maybe I should allow him to do whatever he wants to do with that. But I don't think we're here to talk about Doge, not Doge, but Doge. Stop trying to make Doge happen, Jason. What is the EdTech Situation Room all about, Dr. Fryer?
Well, we are going to talk about the news in the technology world, and we're going to try and analyze it through an educational lens. We've been doing this for quite a few years now, and so we have all of our links on our website, which is edtechsr.com/links. And our topics tonight are the TikTok ban. No, wait, that was last week. Sorry, AI, media literacy / social media, the rabbit hole of AI. So wait a minute. So we have two AIs. So there's a rabbit hole AI. Those must all be your links then. Okay. We've got folks, this literally could become We Talk AI because I think I put about 8 or 9 AI articles in, and Jason has put in about 12 or 15.
Yeah, I carried some more from last week and added a bunch more. So
okay, all right. And then we've got Internet of Things and then our Geeks of the Week. So yeah, it really is. Do you want to rename the show the AI Show? I mean,
I know AI and Education Weekly. Yeah, I know, no kidding. Although I have to say, I've actually had a couple of conversations in the last week with professional colleagues about whether maybe we're taking this too seriously, but I don't think we are. And again, I'm not one to prone to say that this is going to change everything, because I feel like even though a lot of things have been significantly changed with technological advances over the past 30 years, I think the only really close technology in regards to impact on education that I've seen is the internet itself. That this is as revolutionary as the internet, and in a lot of ways, I think probably will exceed its impact because of how immediate it is and how dramatic it, I think, changes so many assumptions. I want to start off with a quick thing that's somewhat related to this topic, but I don't have an article to go with it. But as we talked about in the past, this spring is my 5-year anniversary of receiving my doctoral degree, and my research was about intelligent personal assistants, and by that I mean Siri and the Google products and Microsoft's Cortana. And one of the things that my research found was that it had relatively little impact on student engagement, which was what I was measuring. But it may have impact in other ways. But in what I was measuring in context of my study, it was about student engagement. And I had a control group, and I had a group that had been given specific instruction on the power of Siri as a learning assistant. And one of the things that I did end up reading about when I was trying to find some context of my results was it was right about that time that a lot of people were expressing very strong disappointment in intelligent personal assistants, in particular Siri, because they felt like it just wasn't, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, evolving fast enough to keep people's interest. And in fact, there were more people that would mock Siri and its lack of abilities than really use it as a really powerful tool for learning or engagement. And one of the things that I think we need to think about for a moment is all the excitement around intelligent personal assistants and the game-changing nature of that technology that a lot of people were estimating at the time ended up falling flat because the tools didn't evolve very quickly. And I think in a lot of ways, the artificial intelligence, the language model style, generative artificial intelligence that is a big part, I think, of the conversation in the last couple of months with ChatGPT and its derivatives, that it really is going to deliver on that promise in a way that intelligent personal assistants couldn't, because it really can answer deeper questions that are not just things it can pull off the internet, but rather something it could generate answers to in a way that a human might use its intelligence. So I thought about that the other day, and in fact, we'll start talking about that more directly. So I guess it comes down to, Wes, do we want to do AI first? Do we want to do media literacy first? Or do we want to cover our single article on Internet of Things?
We have 19 articles on AI for today. I think we should do a little of the others, and then let's jump into AI. I will reveal, though, because I haven't shared this with you, I accepted an invitation to be an early tester of Bard in Google, the Google Suite for Gmail and for
for the
Google
plugin
Calendar. Yeah, so I'm in that group.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I have, and it's on my personal account, which I honestly don't use as much as my school account, day to day. I'm in a little chat group with about 4 others. Today people were comparing, and they were putting this into the chat, giving ChatGPT 3.5 the challenge to have a sort of a rap smackdown between Steve Jobs and Wozniak. And so there was a result for 3.5, then there was Bard's response, and then there was the ChatGPT 4 response. Anyway, it was very funny. Yep. And also pretty good. But the point that I heard, and I think we're going to talk about deep fork. Am I saying deep fork? Hard fork. The Hard Fork podcast with Casey and Kevin from the New York Times, Casey Newton and Kevin Roos. They have talked about the power of these tools in the tools that we use, well, a lot of us, just all the time, right? And so being able to use plain language queries to do things with email, do things with calendar, like you said, as a smart assistant. And I think we may talk about that Sundar Pichai interview that they did. I think they just released that on Friday on Hard Fork. And part of what Pichai said was this vision of the smart assistant creating essentially a ChatGPT smart assistant customized for each person. Like, that's a pretty staggering thing to think about, that goes well beyond just, hey, I can ask this chatbot questions like I would a search engine and get facts. It's really different to think about leveraging this power, which we're only beginning to glimpse and experience today in our personal and private information, which, of course, we need to be trusting Google and whatever companies we're giving that access to. So is that okay? Do you want to do a couple more and then we'll jump into AI? Probably every article is going to link back to AI anyway. So, it's
kind of what it feels like right now, isn't it?
Okay. All right. Well, hey, we've only got one IoT article. Why don't we start there? This is Ars Technica from April 4th. Open garage doors anywhere in the world by exploiting this smart device. We do security articles from time to time, and this is an example. There's an $80 device that will open and close your garage door, control your home security, and it uses NEXX servers. However, it turns out it uses the same easy-to-find universal password when it communicates, and therefore, and then since it sends unencrypted email addresses, device IDs, first name, and last initial, it turns out it's just super easy for hackers to be able to exploit this. And when you think about the importance of something that locks your house, like your garage door, this is absolutely terrible. So the article says you should immediately unplug all NEXX devices. And I think this points to the increasing role that digital technologies are having on our lives, the Internet of Home, the the IoT, the Internet of Things, landscape is still a pretty geeky landscape, and folks that are more affluent, are hiring consultants to come in and design systems and be integrators, just like you'd have, a super high end, home stereo and home audio system. But having dabbled with this for quite a while and loving my smart speakers and my setup, I think this is a real cautionary tale of how we need to look at the security and really make sure things are well vetted, and then also follow up to make sure that the solution you've invested in is indeed secure. And when it comes to something like your home security, I really think sticking with a Google, or I'm not a big fan of Amazon and Madam A, but it's whatever your platform is, make sure you research it well, you follow up on it. This could even be something, I don't know that I've done this for a long time, but you can still set Google alerts for different news things. And so if you buy some weird brand garage door opener or some other kind of Internet of Things device, that might even be something you might set a Google alert for, to make sure that, hey, if something hits Google News, you could even do it for the brand name plus security, you're going to be alerted to it. So I'm assuming, Dr. Neiffer, you have not invested heavily in the Nex controlled versions of these home security devices.
Yeah, that's correct. I do have some off-brand stuff in my home, although to be frank, I'm probably gonna get rid of most of that, in part because we have moved away from the Amazon and Google ecosystems and are likely to stick in Apple. And the reason why is because it's a couple-fold. First, I do feel like that when it does have an Apple stamp, it's more likely to be more security conscious than other brands or the other ecosystems for Internet of Things. But also the bottom line is that I think you need to be really careful before you put anything except very well vetted Internet of Things items in your home because of the security flaws. As an example of that, I don't think we talked about this article or this topic, but last year, Wyze, WYZE, they're a company that's been around for 3-4 decades. They used to make terminals in the 90s. The reason why I know that is because my summer job in college was working for an automotive warehouse that had a bunch of Wyze terminals in it, and I was kind of the de facto computer guy for that warehouse, and I had to buy replacement keyboards occasionally for that, so I know the brand name pretty well. But they had an issue where they had an exploit where you could download stills and videos from people's home cameras that had an SD card in it, and it was an unpatched bug for I think like 2 years before they finally actually did something about it, and they'd actually posted that the exploit existed on their security page. And so and again, Wyze is not quite the trusted name it used to be, but
this isn't WYZE, is it?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, here,
wow.
I'll put the article in here, and I had this very camera in my home. Here, because
I've thought that Wyze was pretty good and have considered purchasing one of their cameras. Actually, I've just done their lighting so far, their track lighting.
Yeah, so they had a flaw in their camera system that allowed you to access saved videos and stills, but reason why that's interesting to me is that again, that's a known brand, right? And at the same time, a lot of the stuff that you can go buy off of Amazon right now is using firmware that's not updated and is otherwise just not a very secure system to work with. And that's something that I just don't think the average user's considering when they buy these kind of nifty gadgets for their home. So I feel like at some point that there's going to have to be a reckoning, I guess, for lack of a better term for this, because it just doesn't feel like that that it's been exploited to a point to where it's going to create enough drama to draw attention to it. But I think that's something that we need to be, hyper cognizant of.
I found an article on bitdefender.com, vulnerabilities identified in Wyze Cam IoT device, and it was from March 2022. So yeah, and I think we've talked about this on the show as well. That one of the problems with some of these things, not only is that companies don't necessarily have the same kind of commitment to patching and security that you'd get from a Google or an Apple or an Amazon, certainly Apple, but also the fact that some of this is firmware, which is baked into the device to a greater degree and can't necessarily just be updated over the air. And so, we've seen that with Wi-Fi routers, that can be exploited. And yes, you can flash the firmware, but that is a fairly technical thing that not every consumer is ready to do. So anyway, I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but I'm certainly glad to see that article and that information as far as Wise. And there's some folks that had worked with Amazon that had started Wise, and they've got Chinese manufacturing. And I had really considered, going with some of their products. And this may give me some pause for that. So that's helpful.
Okay, so I think we had discussed maybe doing a little social media, and then we'll jump into the AI rabbit hole.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, well, I don't think we talked about the TikTok hearing at all. Did we last week?
I don't know that we did, but that is definitely a great topic.
Well, let's just
Maybe we did a little bit, but I think we did an article where they didn't really the CEO didn't necessarily do himself a ton of favors, and it was kind of almost an impossible. I don't know. Yeah, let's talk about it a little bit more.
Well, I will say that in the last week, there's been a lot of other media kind of covering this, and it's really interesting to see how creators are covering it on TikTok, because there has been a variety of kind of TikTok style memes that have been derived from those hearings. I would say that in general, there was a lot of mocking of some of the senator's questions, like, for example, does a TikTok access your Wi-Fi network when you're at home? And of course, the answer is yes, that it does indeed access your Wi-Fi network. I think he might have been trying to ask a more nuanced question, but I think if those hearings have proven anything, it's that one of the reasons why it appears very difficult to regulate, or to get Congress to regulate internet data privacy, internet tools, internet apps, hardware, software, right to repair, any of these pieces, because it seems like a lot of our senators, representatives seem woefully out of touch with technology. And, I think that's an important thing to remember, and also one of the reasons why we tend to rely on experts from the executive branch in the various executive departments to do some of this work. And it's because, frankly, they hire industry experts, they hire members of academia, they tend to hire people with skills and knowledge to make some of these pieces of regulation. And I think that's something that we need to be very cognizant about, is that if we continue to rely on a lack of expertise, or maybe viewpoints that are short of the expertise we need to make meaningful regulations, we're going to continue to have questions like, does TikTok access your Wi-Fi network when you're at home? And the other thing I'll also say before we get on some more of the specific headlines, I heard this line several times, both by kind of late night host comedian style coverage of this, and also a lot of creators too, that I think are a little scared about losing the platform of TikTok. But for me, I think one of the things that I'm very concerned about is that a lot of the things that were asked about at those hearings were things that really applied to every single social media tool that exists in the United States, whether they are accessed by teens or not, or owned by Chinese companies or not. And what I think a lot of the kind of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that was being kicked up about TikTok really should be kicked up about almost every tool that's being used in mass by members of the United States public and also the world. And so I just hope we are able to have more nuanced conversations, because if we ban TikTok entirely, or we force it to be sold to a United States company, which would be relatively unprecedented, that's well and good, but it doesn't answer the larger questions about the challenges of social media, the challenges of data privacy, the challenges of what these technologies do or don't do as part of the process. So I just thought I would make that comment to start.
Yeah, there's a lot of grandstanding that always happens whenever we have any kind of technology hearings. And it almost seems like that's the main purpose is to try to, give some people an opportunity to get on the news by trying to make some kind of a statement. And obviously, a lot of times these older adults are not saying things that are entirely on point when it comes to the technologies. But I think that, there's definitely going to be some challenges to that if we get a TikTok ban. The Washington Post article that you've got in there, I'm trying to get the gift link actually, and I'm not having it work, but it was the March 25th article, Hollywood music industry brace for a TikTok ban. 32 of 50 U.S. states already have some kind of TikTok ban on state networks, on government state-owned devices. The U.S. military has had some bans on TikTok previously. But if we would have something that would nationwide block something, I think that's going to set a I think that's probably going to be struck down. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's probably going to be struck down. And I think it's going to set a really difficult precedent because as companies seek to use the global internet, already with GDPR and other kinds of laws, it's a very, very challenging landscape. But to your point, Jason, yes, we should be concerned. We shouldn't just be wanting our representatives and senators to grandstand about China. We've had such a history of anti-Chinese legislation, in the United States throughout time. And I do think that China poses a formidable military threat. And I am genuinely concerned about the outbreak of warfare over Taiwan. I don't know this. We don't even have this in here, but I don't know if you saw what President Xi said to the Communist Party and just publicly to his generals about preparing for war. And I don't think they're really grandstanding that. I think that, there's a consistent message that China said that Taiwan is ours and we need to take it. And so I'm not trying to belittle the threat that is posed militarily and otherwise by China. But I do think that it would be in our interest as a country supporting human rights and supporting representative democracy to have a global internet. I think that we need to be supportive of privacy law. And again, when we get to that Sundar Pichai interview on Hard Fork, we talked about that we need to be thoughtful. We don't want to be rash, but we need to get some regulation right. And the underlying, there was this discussion this last week with, Musk and Wozniak and over 100 other, pretty knowledgeable AI researchers and others and academics saying pause for 6 months in your development of it. But what Pichai said was, wait a minute, how does that really get to the issue? Some of these underlying issues are about privacy, and they're also about the impact that they can have on society. And I don't see the conversations in Congress really getting at those root issues because we need some privacy law in the United States, right? We need to have some consumer protection. And I think as consumers, we need to have a right to our data and to try and penetrate this opaque cloud of data that, as we've talked about a couple shows ago, we talked about mental health data, being for sale. It's all for sale, folks. There's really nothing protecting you and my rights in the United States when it comes to our data privacy. So unfortunately, I don't see that kind of an emphasis. And, we'll see, but I think it would be quite unfortunate if the first actual legislation we have that would fit under the banner of the tech correction, is a TikTok ban, because it is going to probably make a lot of young people upset, which, and maybe I tend to think it is a big deal for someone to have control over the information screens of a majority of, Generation Z citizens in the United States. And
Yep.
Anyway, there are real issues here. I don't think it's just all grandstanding.
But. No. Well, and the other thing to be critical about too is that, I don't know. I don't know how much time you spend on TikTok, Wes. I've scaled back a little bit in the last couple of months, and part of it is that I want to be cautious to be mindful of Montana's ban for this on state time and on state devices. So that's part of it. I also think that my TikTok account's pretty darn bland. I haven't posted anything, and I mostly just follow cooking videos and the a little bit of political stuff, and then I have some interesting areas of TikTok I've ended up in. I actually have been seeing less teacher content lately. I think part of that maybe just because I'm not engaging with it as much. But the bottom line is that ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, claims it's an AI company and not a social media company, and that we knew we were going to rabbit hole down AI at one point or another. But the thing that's interesting about that is that if that's true, then really what we're doing is training AI when we're engaging in it and not just connecting with one another. And I think that is also something we need to be thoughtful and concerned about. But that's also true of basically every other social media platform. So we've been training the machine on Facebook for nearly 20 years now. So let's not forget that.
So let's hit a couple more articles quickly under media literacy and social media, and then we can jump fully into the AI rabbit hole. Last week, I think we talked about the fake photos that were for Donald Trump, fighting police and arrested. Of course, he was arrested or indicted, I guess, this last week. But the article this last week from The Verge on March 27th was about the swagged out Pope being an AI fake. And I actually talked to my students about this. We've talked about Photoshop and you can't believe everything you see. But this is a pretty good article about why this, went viral. But it definitely shows the potential. And this is interesting. And I think I put this in under AI. So yeah, there you go. Everything links to AI. Midjourney is no longer allowing free accounts. It killed the free trials. So this is from Decrypt, which I actually haven't fully researched this source on March 30th. Midjourney kills free AI image generator after explosion of deep fakes. So we've got a number of folks that are creating images that are not, real, and that's causing some trouble. I guess this time we're already. It all goes back to AI. The article above that about Midjourney I'll mention here, and that is that Midjourney has blocked images of the Chinese president, President Xi. So you can choose other world leaders, you can choose celebrities, but President Xi is going to be off limits, which has sparked an ethics debate, and which I think, again, is fascinating from an international standpoint. And how many world leaders or celebrities are you going to, create an exception for? No. This one today was pretty ridiculous. And I mean, I've decided to keep using Twitter. I'm really disgusted with Elon Musk on so many levels. And here's another sort of, I don't even know what's the metaphor when it's it's something else that further, makes the case of why you're upset. Ars Technica, April 5th. Musk extends feud with media by labeling NPR Twitter account state affiliated. So if you don't know, Russia Today is a mouthpiece for Vladimir Putin and for the Russian state. It is not independent media, and it's propaganda. There's a whole lot of stuff that they have, but it is accepted if you are in media literacy circles to be propaganda. National Public Radio is not. And the policy that Twitter previously had specifically highlighted independent journalism like NPR as an example of not being state affiliated. And this is Musk's vendetta, just like he took away the checkmark from the New York Times. This is pettiness, and it's just, it's unfortunate for someone. I mean, I was going to say ignorant. It's just, I don't know. I don't even know if I have all the right words for this, but it's ridiculous. Okay. NPR is not Russia Today. And to label it the same on social media is a lie. And that is being perpetrated by the majority stakeholder of Twitter, whose name is Elon Musk. And I think that's a tragedy. And anyway, I don't know that I'm going to be talking to my kids about this, but goodness gracious, we need to have a greater awareness of sources today than ever before and checking out sources. And when you have a major platform like Twitter lying about the nature of a source, it's just more of a fractured, polluted morass that we live in as far as information. I'll stop trying to rattle off things and give you a chance to talk.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and I saw several conversations about that. Many of them from current and former NPR journalists, and the point that I saw some debate about today was that some of the money for NPR comes from the United States government. There's
1%, I think, of their
yeah,
budget.
yeah. It's a very small part of it. Actually, the largest percentage of money that comes to NPR actually comes from locally supported NPR stations that may get some public funding from state and local sources. But the other thing too is that it does have some underwriting from large corporate sponsors, and then it also gets a large percentage of money from people that donate to a local station and then buy programming from NPR. And the thing that's interesting about that to me is that I'm honestly not quite sure, especially in a freer, I'm not going to say free press, because the press freedom has taken a real beating in the United States over the last 5 years, maybe going back 10 years, actually. If you look at world press freedom indexes, the United States has been taking a real beating there in its shoddy treatment of journalists. But I would also argue, too, that it's I you could argue that that small percentage of funding the NPR gets from the government biases it, but explain to me how that's different than corporate sponsorship of private media, right? I mean, that there has been plenty of evidence that the ability of a channel to get whether it's a newspaper or broadcast journalism and TV or radio or even internet-based journalism isn't impacted by its advertisers. And I just think that even if it was 100% government funded or significantly government funded, or people felt legitimately that the small percentage of public funding it gets does bias it, I just feel like it's just such an incomplete statement because it doesn't take into account the broader architecture of journalism, especially in 2023.
Any other media literacy, social media articles you want to do? Did you want to do that Facebook one about the $12
I
a month?
did, yeah. I just wanted to mention that there is something going on at Meta right now that they're testing in I think it's in New Zealand and Australia for a monthly service that's called Meta Verified. It's $12 a month if you buy it via the web, $15 a month if you buy it via iOS or Android, and um, um, the I guess it kind of works like being verified on Twitter in that it gets you a check mark, which again I think is of relatively dubious value, but not unlike Elon Musk's push to to prioritize paying users. It's also going to benefit you in the algorithm and the feed that appears in others. And part of what the other controversial things that Mr. Musk has been doing lately is that they kind of have that for you column that's popped up on Twitter that's very TikTok like. And if you're not verified, in other words, if you're not paying, you will not appear in the for you column in Elon Musk's vision of Twitter. And I think it's really funny because you may remember that at one point, there it was kind of a meme. There was viral things being shared around that Facebook is going to start charging you $10 a month for access and $20 a month for access, and would you pay that and yada yada yada. And in a lot of cases, the answer was absolutely, not. No one would do that. But the thing I have to wonder is that the reason why they haven't had to charge to this point is because monetizing your data was more than enough money. Advertising was more than enough money to cover the cost of these services. But if that's no longer the case, if I paid $15 a month, I would want my data to not be used at all. And it just doesn't seem like that's the trade-off here. Like they want you to pay $15 a month for a check mark and then, accessing more people via, the algorithm, but they're also still trading your data.
And they said this is to try to provide services for influencers, and you have, I think, supposed to be better support access to maybe real people that would help you, or they'll actually take action if your account has been hacked. I don't have the article for where I read this, but this is a lot like a a mafia protection scheme.
Yeah.
So I understand you're using Facebook. You want some help getting your Facebook hacked account fixed? Well,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to give us $15 a month, and then I
Yeah.
think we're gonna do that.
It'd be a crying shame if you never got seen by anyone because you didn't give us $15 a month. Is what.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you
it's
wonder if there's any regulatory, is recourse. I mean, what?
yeah. Well,
And it's following Elon, right? Elon is doing that for the check mark, and I think it's just Zuckerberg saying, "Oh, well, Elon's gonna get people to pay for a check mark, and maybe we can do that too."
Yeah. And just to be clear, I pay for services, right? There's several services that I pay money for each month because it's a value to me. The $10 I spend on Canva Pro every month is probably the best $10 I spend. Actually, the best money I spend every month is on coffee, but the second best money I spend every month, I think, is on Canva. The Pro version the free version's amazing. The Pro version's that much better, but also I feel like I get my value back in that tool.
Hey, if you happen to be one of our 2 live viewers right now, let us know who you are by putting a little hello in the chat room. We're glad that you're with us and would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. But we're glad that you're here. So, anything else before the AI? We did start late, and I will take full blame for that, folks. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was just all my fault. But we are a little bit more than halfway through. So, anything else under the social media literacy that you'd like to do before we just jump off the 10-meter board into the AI deep end?
No, let's do a little AI.
Okay, great. Where would you like to start?
Well, why don't you go ahead and talk about the Hard Fork podcast from the New York Times?
Oh, this is wonderful. So, I don't know, in the last month, maybe the last 3 weeks, I have become a regular listener of Hard Fork. And Casey Newton and Kevin Roos both write wonderful articles, Casey for the Platformer and Kevin for the New York Times. This is their combined effort, and this was their episode from March 31st. And the headline is Google CEO Sundar Pichai on Bard AI whiplash and competing with ChatGPT. And listening to this, Jason, it made me want to go with you to Google I/O someday to hear him, because and we've said this before, lots of people will hype technology. Jason and I have probably been guilty of it at some point, just naively, it's going to change everything. And actually, I do think that Web 2.0 has changed everything. The read write web has been a tremendous impact in terms of society and just social media and things. But to hear Pichai describe what it is like as CEO to navigate, as Kevin and Casey ask him, this tension between shareholders and folks that want Google to move fast and break things, get stuff out the door, leverage their competitive advantage that they've had with Lambda and the other AI initiatives that they've done, but then also be responsible and wary, because a lot of folks, as they point out, say it's not a 0% chance that artificial intelligence is going to pose some serious, if not existential, threats to humanity, and people are really going to get hurt. But to hear Pichai, one of the things that stood out from this, and a lot of things did, but to hear him talk about how he truly believes this is the most powerful technology that human beings have ever had before, and that it is going to change everything. I believe him. I think that he is telling the truth. I think he is in a position to tell the truth. Does he have a motivation to say this? Well, you could argue that. But at this point, really, there's a lot of folks I hear talking about AI, and I watched a lot of the Bill Gates interview from a week or so ago. But when Pichai said that, I just, okay, I think we're really onto something here. This is a game changer. So what stood out for you? Because I think did you listen to that last week or in the last couple of days?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've been listening to this for the last several weeks as well. What I would say is that I do feel like Google's taken on the chin a lot the last couple of months because they seem to be behind on this. And I think we've even quoted some of the articles to talk about how there was a red alert at Google about, we need to step up and be competitive in the space again. My guess is, and I feel like this was loaded throughout the comments, is that there's actually a lot of activity, and there has been a lot of activity at Google around AI, but they feel a little more obligation to be thoughtful in its implementation. And that to say, one of the things that I do feel that I have kind of picked up. I've listened to probably a dozen Sam Altman interviews in the last 3 or 4 months. He's a very thoughtful guy too, and I don't, I and knows that this is heading somewhere big, and that it has a chance of getting away from us if we're not extremely careful, right? So I I certainly don't want to make it seem like that Google's being thoughtful and no one else is, but I do feel like there's a lot of energy around trying to do this as safely as possible. And I think Google has a lot to lose here too, because if they, I'm curious, Wes, to find out what your reviews look like once you start really using Bard in context of the tools. I also I'm in the Bard beta now, and it's just the web version. It's not plugged into anything, but I am both delighted and slightly terrified of what happens when I give large language model advanced AI access to all my data. It may uncover things I'm uncomfortable with. It may highlight things I'm doing very wrong in a way that maybe is uncomfortable, or maybe gives me superpowers. I don't really know yet, but I was given a lot of hope by that particular podcast, and I think Sundar Pichai is a very thoughtful leader, always has been. I like listening to him, and Google certainly has made its share of mistakes, but I also feel like it's a relatively well-led company.
Absolutely. Well, let's hit a couple other articles that kind of tie into some of these themes. BBC News on April 1st announced that ChatGPT has been banned in Italy over privacy concerns. Again, and something I'll comment on this, and I've been thinking about it. Our youngest daughter received her appointment to the Air Force Academy from one of our state senators, and anyway, we haven't had connection to representatives or senators here in North Carolina. But Jason, it occurs to me that as two educators who are fairly well informed in terms of following news about AI and about social media and about both the positives and the negatives of this, and you are connected politically much more than I am, and you're connected politically on behalf of your organization. So maybe this might be things that will come later after you're not professionally representing an organization and you're an independent citizen. But listeners, people who are following this and tracking this, I think we have responsibilities to contact our elected officials and attempt to have some conversations about these issues. Because we do need, I believe, some privacy regulation in the United States. We need some privacy protections. And all of these people, Sam Altman, Sundar Pichai, Bill Gates, these are smart folks. Now, maybe not Elon, but these other people are recognizing the importance of regulation. And well, probably it is Elon, because he was a co-signatory with Woz to that whole thing saying slow down, right? To try to get companies to slow down their public implementation of AI. So, I mean, how is public policy crafted, and how do elected representatives, which even though we sort of put them on a pedestal, I mean, they are human beings like you and I. I
Yeah.
think that there is an important role for us to try and communicate and engage, and that might be with staffers in the office. But different representatives and senators are all different. But sometimes, people I know from my dad with Veterans Affairs and some of the things that he's done around, veteran things, that he's friends with some of our representatives and senators, particularly one of our senators, Jerry Moran, when we went on an honor flight together to DC, and anyway, met with him. And personal relationships do happen with elected officials. And I think that the importance of having an informed perspective and taking advocacy beyond, sort of wringing our hands as we make a podcast or listen to a podcast. Like we need to identify what are those groups that are advocacy groups. They may be nonprofit, they may be political action committees, but I think we want to band together and try and advocate for constructive regulation in this space. Because as we are listening to these folks talk, and Pachai's interview is another case in point, nobody is saying, do not regulate anything, everything is fine, it's all going to be smooth sailing. Quite to the contrary, everyone is saying we need to really be careful because this is a powerful technology. And in the case of Pachai and some others, unlike anything we've ever seen before. And I never got goosebumps on my arm standing up when I did a Google search, certainly not a Bing search. But I have had that happen more than one time using ChatGPT. So
yeah. Well, and that's the difference between accessing information and having it generate information for you, right? Because of just the stunning difference between the two. And the a couple months ago when I was really starting to dive deeply into this, I mean, these examples are silly, but they're really illustrative. I took a part of a Seinfeld script, so the actual television script, and I had it rewrite it as a short story, but with very, and I can't remember what language I used, but with very dramatic language, and it wrote a beautiful introduction that kind of highlighted how well it could write based on source material. And that's a different thing than stumbling across another person's work on the internet, right? It's just a very different process, and it puts an awful lot of creative power in your hands. Does it call into question all sorts of other processes, right? The future of work, the future of creativity, the future of writing, the future of art, the future of editing and reading. All those are called into account, but let's not diminish the extraordinary power of this. So
absolutely. I'm just realizing that I did not share one of these articles on Mastodon or Twitter. But there was a article, and I'm going to try to find this in my Flipboard magazine, where I think there were Samsung employees talking about privacy, shared some confidential information, and those things are now out part of the training model that ChatGPT and OpenAI have. I'll try to find that article. I did just find this one. This is Ars Technica from today. OpenAI has faced now, or has been threatened with a landmark defamation suit over false claims by ChatGPT. So there is a mayor in Australia, I think, and Australian Regional Mayor Brian Hood was falsely accused or attributed to having served some jail time. And so he has given OpenAI 28 days or something like that. Yeah, 28 days to modify ChatGPT's responses and stop it from spouting disinformation. Otherwise, he's suing. So, we've talked about this before. It's not a search engine yet. We're all trying to use it as a search engine. And legal challenges are going to be a part of this landscape. So how is this going to turn out? I don't know, but I'm sure this is not the last case we're going to see where people are going to be mad. I mean, Jason and I have searched ourselves on ChatGPT and gotten different results. I'm not mad that it thought I went to, the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and what did it gave you a statistics PhD, I think, at one point from Montana. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I can't even spell statistics for the record. But the other piece that I think is really complex about this too is that, related to that, I do the searching for myself demonstration all the time when I'm working with teachers. And by the way, I've got a lot of gigs coming up where I'm going to be brought into a district and be working with a group of administrators one day, and then the next week working with teachers in the same district. I'm doing a couple webinars webinars in the next month, one of which I'll mention as my geek of the week tonight. The thing that I keep thinking about is that I do think that um, um, unless we do something, uh, well, uh, unless we do something about it, people are going to treat this like a search engine. And the way I know it's not the case is because, I can ask who Jason Neiffer is, and it doesn't know, right? It says, nope, not famous, which, sure, ego bruising. But more importantly, if I say, okay, what happens if you know he's from Montana? I said, oh, okay, well, Jason Neiffer in Montana. And then it spouts off some generic information that's kind of right about me being in the education field. And it's just not a search engine. I do think that Bing is closer because they plugged ChatGPT into a search engine, right? So it can help provide you sources so that you can vet the information yourself. I'm just not entirely sure we can rely on our students to do that without us mentoring them to do so, right? Like the number of kids that print off the first three links, printing like it's 2004, or reading the first three links, right, and then drawing conclusions from that. When a good search strategy oftentimes gets you to the second and third page or has you narrow down your search terms quite a bit. That's a really important piece of this that I think is important.
I found the article. This one's from Tom's Hardware. Samsung fab workers leak confidential data while using ChatGPT, and this was from April the 3rd. So I guess in the chip industry, semiconductor industry, there's a lot of trade secrets. There's a lot of confidential stuff, and so some of the Samsung semiconductor employees created data leaks by submitting source code for a proprietary program for ChatGPT to fix the errors. And so that ended up disclosing the code of a top secret application. And then that code, became part of OpenAI and ChatGPT's repository. I think this is actually really interesting, right? As we use these tools, and in general, companies have been able to change their terms of service however they wanted. And what was iTunes at one point, like 46 pages? It probably probably hasn't reduced in length very much. And so they would, change it at any time, and you had to, click yes in order to use their service. But, should you have to give all of your data to a company to be used as training data if you're going to use their service? Well, this suggests that has happened with Samsung, but I think that's going to be yet another important question to be resolved. And maybe that'll be something that courts will weigh in on. I don't know.
Yeah. Great question.
What else in the AI litany of now 20 plus links?
Well, let's see. Let's talk about that New York Times article about what makes a ChatGPT go wrong. And it talks about hallucinations. I have seen several references in the last couple of days about how we need to stop calling them hallucinations, because that's giving it maybe a little too much credit, or I'm sorry, not enough credit for just making things up, right? Like it's taking the bold step of making up answers. But one of the things that this article goes into some detail about is asking when it gets it wrong, why is it getting it wrong? And the reason why is because it's been trained on the internet, right? And there's just plenty of crap on the internet, and it's such an interesting question to ask, because if it was trained on a broader language model, and that's what it's basing it off of, it's taking the large esque of the content and media that we've created and turning it into answers to questions. And we are constantly telling students, right, that when we engage in good media literacy training and good media literacy lessons, that you just can't believe everything you find on the internet, right? Like being on the internet alone is not a factual piece enough to where you shouldn't vet it through other information. And that's what's scary about not helping students understand these tools, because if we, allow students to relegate their writing and researching tasks to a generative AI bot like ChatGPT or Google Bard or any of the other many tools that are now available, it's essentially doubling down on the sins that a lot of us are very concerned about in regards to the internet. And again, I think it's just another good example of where we have to be really careful before, or how we advertise these tools, and what we're telling students, and how we're engaging in some of these processes. And so, yeah, I thought that article was a pretty interesting read. And you've I'm sure all heard the term garbage in, garbage out. It helps describe when when data processing goes wrong. Well, remember, these tools have taken up billions, maybe trillions of cues from us. And that's a problem because we generate crap all the time.
One of the things that Pichai said, and which I really resonated with in that interview, which this ties to, is that one of the best ways to use ChatGPT or Bard today is to ask it things about topics that you really know a lot about, because you can fact check those based upon your own experiences and knowledge base. And one of the things that I have found that's pretty, impressive and even goosebump raising is how good it is
Yeah.
in some of those cases. But Jason, I think it's interesting when we talk about, being careful what we're going to share with students. I'm sorry, this is pessimistic, but irrespective of what we do or don't do in school today, I think that society is just going to want to use these tools as a search engine and as an everything omnibar, basically. I don't remember if it was Casey. I think it was Casey that asked Sundar Pichai, hey, is this the future where suddenly the Google omnibar search bar is just the everything for Google Assistant, for my email, for my calendar, for everything? And he said, well, there's a lot of capability there. And he didn't say that is the vision. But, we another good point that Pichai made was, hey, let's just stop debating whether this is artificial general intelligence or not. It is absolutely going to be very soon having tremendous power to do things that are harmful, and disinformation and misinformation is one of those things. And so whether or not you agree on a definition of AGI, its capability to generate malinformation even at scale, we have a problem with it now. It's just going to get worse. But now, all of that saying, I totally think we need to, do as much media literacy as we can, and encourage, good appropriate uses of this. And to your point, Jason, yes, we know I'm teaching about Wikipedia and encouraging my kids to use it as a launch pad for their research, right? We will never say, as an academic, I've never heard anyone say this, use one source, don't cross-check this. All you need is one. We've, said no educator ever said that. And so when it comes to ChatGPT, just like with web searches, just like with Wikipedia, we're going to encourage students to, vet their sources. But at this point, we don't have a lot of source citation with these AI tools. And so it's weird because, it's almost like we take a step backward. I mean, at least if you're web searching, then that's a link and you can see where that article came from and what was that source. When it's ChatGPT, we heard an employee of OpenAI say that they were developing the capacity to ask the AI to turn its sort of eyes back on itself and say, well, this is where that information came from. But I don't think that is very well developed yet. You've used Bing a bit. Does Bing, with its sources, give you good citations as far as where that information came from?
That's a great question, Wes. Yes, and in fact, and I would say I'm probably accessing the Bing bot 10-12 times a week. I'm using ChatGPT. I would say I probably use it 10-15 times a day. Google Bard once or twice a day, maybe 4 to 5 times a week for Bing. It does provide sources, but as an example of that, when I was actually coming up with some slides and some exemplars for a session I did at NCC a couple of weeks ago, one of the things it cited was it was 3 legitimate sources, although they were, I would say they were factually correct, but I wouldn't call them authoritative sources, if that makes any sense, right? Like I didn't, the information wasn't incorrect, but it didn't cite who I would consider to be experts in this space, right? But then one of the other ones, I clicked on the link and it happened to be an kind of an ebook scam site, like downloading a PDF or an EPUB of a book. And it might have, at one point had a book that it thought was an authoritative source. You could download it, but it wasn't a very good quality source. And so, yeah, I mean, again, I think Bing's being really smart about this. I should say credit to Microsoft for being very smart about this. I think it's really compelling to connect this to your search engine, right? Like that's a
Oh yeah.
really idea, but it's in the same way, I think we have to be really thoughtful that, not unlike, that there's an algorithm and a complicated formula that says what's on the first couple of pages, those same things need to go into picking the sources it's citing, when you're asking it, detailed questions.
Couple thoughts. Number one, it'll be interesting when Tim Cook weighs in on some of this. I don't think I've heard anything about Apple, Tim Cook talking about this. So that's going to be interesting. But Jason, here's the real litmus test. Have you caught yourself saying to a colleague, instead of I'm going to Google that, I'm going to Bing that? Has that happened?
No, that's not my link. Not yet. So sorry, Bing, for that. I also think that's a silly name for a search engine, but who am I to judge? So,
Okay, well, we have actually gone exactly an hour so far. That's not to say we can't continue for a little bit more before we geek of the week it. We do have over 20 links, and we've covered probably about 6 or 7 of them.
sure, I can go about 6 more minutes, I think.
Sure.
One of the things that I would suggest that is a good place to start, I think, if you're trying to sell this to colleagues that something big has happened. Bill Gates a couple weeks back has kind of declared that the age of AI has begun, and this is from Gates Notes. That's Bill Gates's blog on March 21st, and he mentioned something that that I'm not sure if we've talked about this or not, but he mentions the differences in test scores between ChatGPT 3.5 and ChatGPT 4. ChatGPT 4 has passed all AP tests with a 4 or a 5, with the exception of AP language and AP literature. And the reason why I think that's hilarious is because, of course, their language models, right? And I would and they can write, and I would assume that that's something that should advantage it with the AP English test, the 2 different AP tests. Shout out to AP literature and composition and AP language and composition teachers for obviously being super awesome to get your kids to pass that test when the AI language bot couldn't. But it's not a fad, and I know I feel like I'm a broken record here, and I know my staff is getting tired of me talking about it because it is a huge topic that in fact a couple members of my staff, I just don't talk about it around them anymore because I can see the eye rolls are coming from them. But it's happening now, and we can't ignore this because that will be very much to our peril.
So I'll add to that an article actually from the Seattle Times. So this is up in your neck of the woods. And this is an op-ed that was written by an educator who is the co-founder. I'm trying to gain myself time because there's so many articles to go through. He's the co-founder of the Center for the Informed Public at the University of Washington. And maybe I put this under media literacy. The article is, maybe I should find the article before I start to talk about it. There it is. It's the third one. The chatbot era, better or worse off? It's the third one under the headline AI. So this was in the Seattle Times on March 31st. And basically it seems to be saying, there's a lot of problems with this. It's going to be difficult. It references the Kevin Rue's New York Times issues and stories, but it's, to me, the sense of this is rather dismissive. And Pachai talked about this too. There's a number of folks that will talk about these learning models as simply a glorified fill in the blank, and they'll be rather dismissive and say that it's not a game changer. I have participated in a conversation with a number of educators talking about these tools as well, and the general sentiment of most of them was dismissive. I tried this and it didn't work. It wasn't that good. I mean, I think we need time to process this. This is one of the benefits of getting together with you, Jason, just about every week to talk through these things. But I would be curious, as you're visiting with different educational groups, and maybe you can even have some kind of informal survey or formal quick survey to kind of sort of pre-test where are people's sentiments and feelings about this, you know, kind of going into it. But I think there's always a lot of doubt when it comes to anybody who's saying that this is a big game changer. But I just think fundamentally this is challenging so many things about assessment and the ways that we have used the essay, for instance, to independent essays that you write on your own time when you go back to your house or your dorm room or apartment or whatever. I think that they're challenging things at a really basic level, and so I would, number one, I mentioned this in this group that and maybe you can do this within CECE, Jason. Here's a great geomap. Go ahead and do all the districts in Montana, Washington, and Oregon. Who is blocking ChatGPT? How many public school districts are just flat out blocking it? That'd be a great thing to be able to have some visibility to. And then around just talking with teachers and getting a sense, where are they on a scale, positive or negative? I mean, I think I'm kind of smack in the middle. I think is the most powerful. If Pachai is right, this is the most powerful technology humans have ever encountered. It's going to be used in the most powerful ways that it possibly could. So it's gonna be used in phenomenally powerful, wonderful, great, totally history-changing ways, and then it's going to be used in incredibly devastating ways as well.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Shall we geek it? Well,
yeah, let's do it. Mine's related, so I'll just go quickly here. I'm really delighted that next week I will be joining a couple of colleagues in virtual learning for a webinar with the Digital Learning Collaborative, and it's called AI and Chatbots and Online and Blended Learning. And I'm really excited to join colleagues from Minnesota and Michigan that have been kind of at the forefront of discussing this in their regions and nationally. To talk about it, it'll be facilitated by Allison Powell at the Digital Learning Collaborative, and I'm really excited to have an opportunity to speak about this in this arena. So you can sign up, it's free for everyone. There's a link from the DLC on Twitter that we'll share in our show notes, and is also I tweeted out tonight. But yeah, join me and other awesome people to talk about this very topic.
Awesome. I've written a few blog posts in the last couple of days, and one of them was Monday night after I participated in a Teachers for an Informed Public webinar, and I just called it Media Literacy Lessons April 2023. So I recorded an 11-minute video screencast talking about the recent lessons I've been teaching my middle schoolers, and then just shared that online. One of the resources that I learned about at that event was some new lessons from Misinformation Day. And so here's the link to that Google Doc. One of them is a lesson about TikTok and viral misinformation. And it occurs to me that there are probably very, very few schools that are actually talking about TikTok and helping students navigate TikTok. And as the number one information source for news for Gen Z, how can we not talk about TikTok? Like, that's sort of like saying, we're living in a literate world and we're not talking about books. So last one, I used this today. This was fun. We had a Minecraft build challenge, and kids worked in teams and built Rubik's Cubes. And I wanted to make animated GIFs to embed the animated GIF of a fly around of each student's or team's build. And then I used this free Adobe Express webpage where you can convert a movie file to an animated GIF. And it was lovely, and it was free, and it was small, and it was fun. So that's it for Geeks of the Week.
Awesome. Well, Wes, where can people find you on the interwebs?
I am W Fryer on Twitter. You can go to wesfryer.com/after and find a lot more links. How about you?
I am on Twitter at Tech Savvy Teaching. You also find me on Mastodon.cloud, and my username there is Knife. But this here is the EdTech Situation Room. We are a once a week podcast on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and sometime in the middle of the night if you happen to be joining us from Western Europe. If you can't join us live, although we wish you would, we're on YouTube and Facebook broadcasting every week. You can find our podcast on those platforms afterwards or wherever finer podcasts are aggregated. You can certainly also go to our website, edtechsr.com, get the show links, get a tiny MP3, and even look at the stuff we didn't have a chance to talk about as we never get to all the links that we'd like to share with you each week. So we hope you have a great week. Stay safe, stay savvy. We hope to see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.
Bye-bye, everybody.